So you got to watch what's that movie, The Little Things?
Yeah, yeah, with Denzel Washington, Jared Leto, Rami Malek, I think his name is, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it wasn't, I wouldn't say a great film, but it was a good film. I enjoyed the ending. It took some turns I didn't expect.
Is it worth reviewing on the podcast? I knew that I've heard it referred to as propaganda.
Yeah, if you want to talk about how cops get away with shit and how you're programmed to cheer for them, we probably could review it on the podcast, actually, yeah.
I feel like maybe we should have a whole propaganda month.
Yeah, we could actually.
And just dissecting it and being like, this is why this is a problem, or this is what happens in real life, as opposed to what we see on screen.
I think that would be good. In like, without spoilers, I'll just say, like, just watching it, you're obviously supposed to be cheering for the cops, right? They're trying to hunt down a serial killer. That's kind of the point of the movie. But as you know, with most Hollywood films, and maybe it's not so untrue, but you see the cops really like not following the rules and doing things, that they shouldn't. And all I could think was like, fuck, this happens. Like in real life, this happens all the time.
I heard that the screenplay was written in the 90s and hasn't really been touched up much. So
it takes place in the 90s.
Well, okay, so there you go.
Yeah.
So yeah, I believe like it was kind of like stuck in that time and hadn't really been updated. I mean, at least it took place in the 90s.
Yeah, I could see that. I think it takes place in 1990. So like, at first I was like, what year does this take place? Because like you're using payphones, and then I'm like, oh, that 19, because they tell you there's one character at 1990, but I thought it was like a flashback. I'm like, nope, that just happened. Okay, never mind.
That's what happened with Perks of Being a Wallflower, remember?
Yeah.
He like hands in this book report, and it's like, fucking paper? What? He's writing on paper?
Yeah. I mean, it's based on a book from the 90s, right? So,
yep.
That's exactly it. So you heard about all the GameStop stock stuff today, right?
I heard about some of it, specifically through a couple of people I know personally. What do you got for me?
Dude,
Stocks with Ty.
Me, all right, so like it's a little personal, but I have been following the Wall Street Bets Reddit because I wanted to get in on this shit, right? A, I want to make some money because fuck this country, I need it, and B, because fuck Wall Street, I want to be a part of it. So I've been following them, and there was a big hearing over the weekend. I forget his name off the top of my head, but he basically made like the most money off of the GameStop stocks, and he had to appear before like a grand jury basically, and they were questioning him about the stocks and like how legitimate it was. The CEO of Robinhood had to go on, the CEO of Reddit. Long story short, he went out like a fucking baller and just talked about how like, it's time for people to be able to take back the power. And like, he's like, I like the stock. And after the hearing, he bought 50,000 more shares of GameStop stock just to be like, fuck you. And he just made them look like shit. So they wound up ruling that Robinhood was in the wrong for like throttling people, not allowing them to buy GameStop stock. So it was like a big victory. So basically on the Reddit post, everyone was like, fuck yeah, we're going after GameStop again this week. Be there, be square, like we're going to the moon. So like I got real hyped up, a lot of people got hyped up, so we all bought GameStop stock on Monday. And it really didn't move. It didn't do anything on Monday. Didn't do anything on Tuesday. It dipped like a little bit, went up a little bit. And I bought it with my rent money. So rent's due on the 1st. And I was like, well, fuck, I really need to get this money back because I got to pay my rent. And I was waiting for my tax refund. And I was hoping it would come in this week. And it said next week. And I'm like, fuck. So this morning, I was like, whatever, I just got to fucking get out. So I sold all my shares of GameStop stock for almost exactly what I paid for. I think I lost like 30 cents. And I was like, whatever. And not an hour later, I get my tax refund. And
okay.
I'm like, oh, shit. I'm like, I didn't have to sell my stocks. I'm like, whatever. I go on my lunch break and I look at the stock and it's up to like $47. And I'm like, fuck, like it went up a few bucks. Like I could have actually made like $30 off that shit. I'm like, whatever. I take a nap on my break because, that's what I do. I wake up and it's at $53, right? And I'm half asleep still. So I'm like, oh shit, it dropped down, thinking it's $43. So I decided to buy a whole bunch of stocks again. And after I buy it, I'm like, oh shit, it's at 53, not 43. And I'm like, well, fuck it, I'm in now. And then, so, the stock market closes at 4, and I decided to check right before it closed. And I'm like, holy shit, it's at $92. I'm like, well, that's wild. And at least with Robinhood, and I'm assuming I don't know a whole lot about stocks, but you can trade for about a half hour before or after the stock market opens and closes. So it's like 4:10, and my coworker who's really into stocks is looking at it with me, and it's up to like $116, and it's like going up to like 117, drops down to 114. It's like kind of like dipping like how stocks do. And he's like sell half your shares right now. And I'm like, what? He's like, sell half your shares right now. If you sell half your shares, you guarantee you lose no money and you probably gain some money. He's like, you keep the rest, and if it keeps going up, you sell them tomorrow and you make even more money. But this way you guarantee to lose nothing. And I'm like, he's like, I'm telling you, do it, man. So I sold half my shares and wound up winning back all the money that I lost and then some. And right now it's sitting at, I think, $168. So it kept going. I actually hit $200 or $198 at one point. But this is all after hours, so you can't trade anyway. But I'm excited to see what happens tomorrow. It's kind of wild. I think even the Wall Street Bets guys were kind of taken by surprise that it happened so quickly. It happened like within the last hour of the stock market being open. And in addition to that, AMC actually is up like 18%. Costs, which is I think like a headphone company, they're up 50%. Express was up like 25%. So like all these stocks that Wall Street Bets has been talking about targeting shot the fuck up today. So it's on. I don't know how long it's gonna last, but the squeeze is happening.
You heard it here first, folks, from the Wolf of Wall Street himself, co-host Ty. If you do want some more information on that story, all you have to do is go to your search engine of choice and look up Keith Gill, also known as Roaring Kitty.
Yes, he's the one that I was mentioning earlier.
Investors from Wall Street Bets.
Yeah, he's a baller.
Now, speaking of individuals being able to take back the power instead of continuing to be manipulated by a fixed and capitalist system that allows for such a narrow margin of error when you happen to be a socioeconomically disadvantaged individual.
Whoa.
Off the top of your head, how many new reviews do you think we have this week?
Ooh, I'm going to say there's a 0 in it.
That is correct, yes.
Oh, man. Is it just a 0?
That is also correct.
What?
Good guess, dude. You have been here for a while. That's right. Since we do not have any new reviews, we're going to go into the theme music in a sec. But just so you know, if you want your name and review to be read at the top of the show, all you have to do is go to Apple Podcasts and leave us a 5-star review telling us how much you love or hate the show. Make sure it's 5 stars, though. It really helps us out. And we'll read it at the top of the show, just like we would have done now. This could have been you.
Yeah. And I know some people personally who listen to this show, so you better leave a review. All right? I'll find you.
He has a very particular set of skills.
Yeah.
Tyler, is one of those skills bringing in the theme song?
It absolutely is. Bring it on in.
Welcome back to the Politipop Podcast, the podcast where we read between the lines of your favorite pop culture media and discuss the social and political themes within. I am your co-host, Mike Booch, a.k.a. Spider-Gram, a.k.a. Peter Podhead, and I am thrilled to be joined by my co-host, Ty.
Hey, what's up?
And at the top of the show, we'd like to remind you to subscribe to our YouTube channel, like our videos. You can email us at politipopcast@gmail.com and find our show notes and sources at politipoppodcast.wordpress.com. Today, we are taking a step back from last month's Black History Month Spotlight, which was informative and it was introspective. And
it was emotional.
It was emotional, and as I've already mentioned, it was very dependent, if not intentionally, on Black trauma. as a lot of stories do tend to be, for better or worse, or because it's just impossible to tell a story about a person of color without it.
Well,
But
unfortunately, I think the history of black people, especially here in the United States, is full of trauma. Like we just you can't really get away with it, no matter what time period you're talking about.
And today's movie takes us into more of a modern time period, and it is the first of 3 movies we're going to be doing this month that, instead of focusing on black trauma, focus more on black triumph. And these stories, while they are about the black experience, they may not specifically be about that. And today's movie is one that holds a dear place in both of our hearts, I think it's fair to say. This is Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. How do you feel about this, Ty?
It's probably one of my top 10 films today, I would say. I love it. I could watch this movie literally over and over again. I think we just watched it like 3 weeks ago, right? Over a phone call, and got to rewatch it last night, and it's just great. I would argue it's the best Spider-Man movie ever made, and probably top 3 comic book movies ever made.
Now, going into this movie, there was some controversy, as there tends to be with anything that has a non-traditional take, and that word is very, very special, and we'll expound upon that in a sec. But for lack of a better word, a non-traditional take on beloved property. In this case, it was Spider-Man. They were going to have Miles Morales along with a bunch of other Spider people in it who aren't your typical Peter Parker Spider-Man. And there was obviously people blowing up online. Oh, this is just pandering, and it's forced diversity and all this other stuff. It's amazing for so many people who gatekeep to not realize how much their own hobby or passion, in some cases, is rooted in telling diverse stories.
It's interesting to me that so many people were outraged about this film, because this is not the first appearance of Miles Morales, right? He came out in 2011, was one of the first, I think, biracial heroes. And there was a ton of outrage when he took over. He took over when Peter Parker of the Ultimate Universe was killed, and he became the new Spider-Man. And I think he really took the comic book world by storm. He was really well written, really interesting, and you cared for him almost immediately. And his Spider-Man run, it's probably one of the best in history. I mean, it's one of the best Spider-Man stories I've read in the last probably 20 years, honestly. Like, I think it was, for a while, Ultimate Spider-Man was better than the regular Spider-Man line. So, I would have thought people would have gotten over it by now. It's 2018. Miles Morales had been around for a very long time and established himself as a very good character, a strong superhero. But nope, the people were still offended. So, what are you going to do about it?
And while creator Brian Michael Bendis has written multitudes of characters by this point, some original ones, some for big name properties, I think his run writing Miles is one of his most notable. And shortly right after that, you can correct me if my timeline is off, but he went to DC to write Superman almost right off of Miles. Am I close in there or no?
No. He wrote X-Men for many years after Spider-Man. He did a long stint on X-Men, which was it was mixed. I'd say fans were mixed on it, and then he left Marvel to go to DC and do Superman.
Now, you don't give Superman to just any writer, even
no,
even if it had been a bit since he worked on Miles Morales.
This was a huge move. I mean, they were pilfering one of Marvel's premier writers, someone who had been top tier for them. They had given Spider-Man, Miles Morales Spider-Man, and X-Men he had been writing for all these years. These are all like top Marvel characters now, and the fact that DC was able to grab him and they put him directly on Superman. They didn't ease him in. They didn't give him I don't know, Green Arrow, and then not that I don't love Green Arrow, but Superman's like top 3 for DC. You know what I mean? And they threw him right in there. And Superman has a tendency to not be the most popular character, by a lot of people, and
He's very difficult to write. Well,
exactly, and I think it was a bold move for them to throw him onto there. But Bendis' Spider-Man run is revered. It's considered one of the best Marvel works. Both his Miles Morales and Peter Parker work. So it was a big move.
Now, you had mentioned that Bendis also worked on X-Men. Who now I didn't read his X-Men run. I still have to read more of his stuff from Miles, honestly. But the X-Men and a lot of Marvel characters have their roots in the immigrant experience, and I want to talk about that before we get into Spider-Verse specifically, because I really want to nip this whole diversity thing in the bud so we can get it over with.
It's funny that you mentioned that too, because even Stan Lee gave his blessing to Miles Morales, Stan Lee's literally the creator of Spider-Man, right? He's kind of like considered kind of the father of Marvel. He helped create most of those characters that we know and love. He even came out and said he was really happy to see, a Spider-Man that represented, the United States of today, a different version, but something that people could still relate to. And I think, if Stan Lee can approve of it, and you claim you're a diehard comic book fan, you love Marvel, you love Spider-Man, you shouldn't complain then. I feel like that's, it's, there you go, right? The guy himself is saying it's cool.
And that puts a lot of pressure on the filmmakers themselves to really make this a comprehensive movie, because you can see just by the artistic nature of the film that this isn't specifically a black or diverse centric story, but it is about somebody who is from a background that's not just a white male. It is about a person of color, and they made it a point to show that this is a movie that is about a comic book character, that it is for comic book fans, regardless of which version of Spider-Man you like, that it is something that is faithful to the medium if you consider yourself to be a fan of it. Comic books in general are, at their core, an American art form, as in the American experience is so often shaped by the narrative of immigrants, and you have so many comic book pioneers who were individuals who were trying to escape persecution as being Jewish Americans, and that's how you get characters like Spider-Man. That's how you get characters like the X-Men. The X-Men is an allegory for civil rights. Spider-Man, you have an individual who is insecure with himself every day and is able to put on a mask and become a different version of himself, which is the immigrant experience. You have your own version of yourself, who you are at home with your family, and then you have a version of yourself you need to be to fit in with the rest of the world as you go outside.
This is what made Marvel so popular, I think, right? Like, this is what set them apart from DC, was people you could relate to. Peter Parker paid bills. He went to school. He was late for things. Like you said, the X-Men were mistreated, and they had to, fight for their right to exist. And I think people reading these characters could really relate. And that's what has always kind of set Marvel apart and made them so popular.
And I think it is a regretful part of Marvel's history that while they were at the forefront of a lot of progressive moves in the comic book industry, there's a documentary on Disney Plus I saw called Behind the Mask, and they talk about a bunch of different characters who were of diverse backgrounds who were gradually put into Marvel, and they also talk about a lot of the people behind the scenes. You had this woman who was an editor and became an artist. You have this black man who was a writer there, and you did have a more diverse creator team behind Marvel, and yet for the most part, until a point, you still had a Eurocentric view of these characters, and
right.
And constantly Marvel was at odds with the Comics Code Authority, trying to push the envelope here and trying to cross the line. And Stan has said multiple times, and whether or not you regard him as the father of Marvel is a different story. It's not a debate for this podcast. We got to talk about King Kirby. We'll talk about him a little bit here because his influence is all throughout comic books. Obviously,
I mean, this film is dedicated to him, actually. So
but Stan has said multiple times that it's just it's just showing the world around you. And just like you said, that was one of the best parts about Marvel Comics, was these stories were relatable, but also it's because the world in which they took place in. It didn't take place in Metropolis. It didn't take place in Gotham City. The Avengers come from New York. Captain America is from Brooklyn. Peter Parker's from Queens. Miles is from Brooklyn. Like, this is as real as it gets. So if you are upset that a comic book about characters who are based in New York is showing a diverse group of people, that's on you, because that's just how the world is. You can't take a train in New York City pre-COVID. I don't know what it's like post-COVID. Haven't since. But, you can't take a train in New York City and not see 30 different types of people sitting on one bench. Like,
yeah.
I would also follow up by saying that creating a story about otherness and creating a story centered around somebody who doesn't fit the mainstream narrative, that is the most traditional thing you can do in comics. Because once again, as an American art form, it is a story about immigration. It is a story about being othered, and it comes from having different colored skin, not just having superpower.
Yeah, well said.
Now that we have that out of the way, there's a full spoiler warning in effect. That's right, my spoiler sense is tingling, and and if you have not seen Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, it's been a few years since it's been out at this point, but please see it before you listen to this podcast. There are going to be some detailed plot spoilers and some we just reference random shit. You may have to actually watch the movie to know, but either way, there's a spoiler warning in effect. And Ty, at your earliest convenience, can you please give our lovely listeners the plot?
Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. Teen Miles Morales becomes the Spider-Man of his universe and must join with 5 spider-powered individuals from other dimensions to stop a threat for all realities.
Now, speaking of all realities, I also want to talk about people looking from the outside in on our reality of comic books. I was looking up some different reactions to Into the Spider-Verse, and one recently, it came out 10 months ago. Somebody was viewing it for academia and talking about stereotypes and how this film either breaks some stereotypes and apparently reinforces some stereotypes. And for the most part, it was very well done, but you could tell it was done by somebody who wasn't very well versed on the characters. Just okay, I saw this movie once or twice, and I'm going to apply an analysis to it. But one thing, and for the most part, it was actually a pretty great analysis, especially from somebody looking in from the outside. But one of the things they mentioned was that a negative stereotype of Miles was that he loved doing graffiti. He's a young black kid who likes doing illegal stuff, and he doesn't like school. I had to make it a point to comment on this video as the podcast, and very respectfully, just saying what I'm basically going to say now, and that's that. So similar to comic books being an American art form, so too is hip hop. And obviously not every black person is hip hop, but if you were a black person in America, you're I would say even more so if you're an Afro-Latino person in the United States, then your experience is very specifically intertwined with hip hop. Hip-hop has 4 basic elements. You have DJing or turntabling, you have breakdancing, you have the spoken word, which is obviously where rapping comes from, and you have graffiti, which is another part of it. So the whole culture itself, it's not just a music genre, is what I'm trying to say, and that Miles embodying some of that is actually a version of authenticity, as we do see a lot of it in this film.
He's a kid from Brooklyn, right? I mean, the hip-hop scene in New York is huge. Like that, it's a huge part of the culture, I think, and I don't think that rings untrue at all. That he would be, into that kind of stuff. You know what I mean? That definitely makes sense.
Yeah, they also said that he didn't like school, and I'm like, well, once again, upon another viewing or two, you might have realized that he's actually very academically inclined, if not gifted or talented. And they show how smart he is at school, but he doesn't like that school because he feels that it's elitist.
Yeah, he wants to be with his friends. He wants to be in a public school with all the kids he knows, and it doesn't have to follow the strict guideline for what he has to wear and stuff. I mean, I think that's a pretty normal reaction for a kid, especially coming from a public school and going to a private school.
Following that idea, Miles is questioning his own authenticity. Now, because he says he wants to be among the people, which, points Miles for a very Fred Hampton way to look at things. But he says he wants to be among the people. He qualified for this spot, but believes that he still got it by chance, that it was a lottery. He doesn't deserve to be there. We talked a bit about imposter syndrome in a few other episodes, but here I think we see it's a huge part of Miles's character that not only does he feel that he doesn't belong at this school, which, by the way, is a very culturally diverse school.
Yeah.
And here's another case in which the filmmakers get it right here. It's a matter of Miles, yes, while being a person of color is a very strict part of his identity, this is a pretty diverse area he's in. He's feeling othered here for different reasons. And as we find out later in the movie, he ends up feeling very othered because he gets spider powers.
Yeah. Well, there's a great moment, right, where he's walking down the street and he runs into all these kids he knows from school. They have secret handshakes, and he's making jokes and saying hi to everybody. And it's clear he's very popular. He has a lot of friends. People like him. And then he gets to his new school and he tries the same exact thing. He makes jokes to the kids. He tries to start a conversation, and everyone just kind of gives him looks like, what, why are you talking to me? So I think, that was a great way to show just how different he feels being in the school where, the things that he would normally do and say just aren't working right now.
Another thing I want to bring up is we spoke about this when we were discussing Spider-Man Homecoming. Your first appearance on the podcast. Everybody.
What?
Go listen to episode 7 and
Oh, boy.
listen to my horrible production quality.
I was so nervous. I didn't know how to talk, so don't judge me.
But one thing we did agree on, if I remember correctly, was that the story of Spider-Man isn't inherently, and specifically Peter Parker too, it's not inherently a white story. He's a kid in Queens who lives with his aunt, grows up from a broken family, has trouble paying bills and stuff. A white kid isn't the first person, especially nowadays, who would come to mind when you think of that.
Yeah, I agreed. I mean, I think a lot of his story, might speak to a New Yorker or just, a teen or young adult in the United States. But I don't think, color or race has anything to do with it. I think you could kind of make him anything, right? And or anybody, and he would still be Peter Parker. He'd still be Spider-Man. And I think, and that's not what they tried to do here, right? With Miles Morales. They didn't try to do that with the comic or the film. They didn't try to replace Peter Parker with an exact replica of Peter Parker who's, half black and half Puerto Rican. He's his own person. But I think what they're trying to get to is, just the way you could see yourself being Peter Parker. There are tons of kids that could see themselves being Miles Morales. And, he still deals with real life issues and concerns. How do you talk to your father when you guys just don't seem to get along? How do you fit into a new school? These are the kind of things that people deal with in everyday life, and they purposely try to go that route with Miles Morales. And we do see that a little bit with Peter, too, that when we do see Peter Parker in the film, he's still dealing with things that people, in everyday life have to deal with as well. And I think this movie's kind of for anybody. You can find someone to relate to, something to relate to, no matter what your background is.
Yeah, you can relate to a character who may not be Miles or Miles plus multiple characters in this film.
Yep.
Something I didn't really notice the first couple times I saw this, but noticed recently is that they very specifically make it Miles' film. It's actually a while before they introduce Peter B. And it's not just Miles as in story-wise, like it is, but also everything around the film, the characters surrounding him, the music, the soundtrack, everything really tells you, this is Miles's world. We're going to put a lot of other people into it, but at the end of the day, it is going to be his story. And I think that is a very conscious effort made, and because this could be a white savior story, like so many others fall into the very easy trap of becoming one, even if you're well-meaning.
Right. So, you mentioned it earlier. An important part of Miles' identity is that he is Afro-Latino, right? His mom's Puerto Rican, his dad is black, and while that's not the focus of the story, I think it's an important representation to see. You don't really see that too often. I have a little bit here, an article about Afro-Latinos that I think we'll put in the show notes that is pretty interesting. I'll just read a little bit of it. Afro-Latino, a deeply rooted identity among U.S. Hispanics. Identity for U.S. Hispanics is multidimensional and multifaceted. For example, many Hispanics tie their identity to their ancestral countries of origin, Mexico, Cuba, Peru, or the Dominican Republic. And they also look to their indigenous roots. Yeah. Among the many ways Hispanics see their identity is their racial background. Afro-Latinos are one of these Latino identity groups. They are characterized with diverse views of racial identity, reflecting the complex and varied nature of race and identity among Latinos. In the U.S., Latinos with Caribbean roots are more likely to identify as Afro-Latino or Afro-Caribbean than those with roots elsewhere. Those that identify as Afro-Latinos are more concentrated on the East Coast and in the South than other Latinos. And basically, a lot of this comes down to, unfortunately, slavery, right? Basically,
everything does.
Yeah,
yes.
It actually says here in the article that in Latin America's colonial period, about 15 times as many African slaves were taken to Spanish and Portuguese colonies than to the U.S. today. About 130 million people of African descent live in Latin America, making up roughly a quarter of the total population. So, slavery was not just here in the U.S. We do mention how it's such a disgusting but important piece of our history to remember and talk about. But this is a world issue that happened, and again, the Portuguese and the Spanish were involved in slavery quite a bit. And I mean, you're Dominican, right? So I mean, technically you're Afro-Latino.
Yeah, that's where all my African stuff on my DNA test results comes from. It comes from the Dominican Republic because, yes, that the island of Hispaniola was where Columbus landed, and he started the transatlantic slave trade. So that's how you get a bunch of African slaves coming to Latin American colonies. And that's how, the island of Hispaniola, you have, what became the Dominican Republic and what became Haiti. Like the experiences of individuals of African descent and individuals of Latino descent are intertwined in the United States.
Yeah, and this article does mention that a lot of people of that descent don't necessarily consider themselves Afro-Latino. They don't really consider themselves black. But Miles is very specifically Afro-Latino. Again, his mother is Puerto Rican, his father is black, and being such a probably not a very represented group. I found an article that said what Latino critics are saying about Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. And I thought there was some really interesting stuff here. With a close to 100% rating on Rotten Tomatoes, Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse has pulled in an avalanche of rave reviews and even Oscar buzz. Missing from the piles of critical acclaim is the voice of Latino critics, and in particular Afro-Latinos. Since the first big screen appearance from Miles Morales, a comic book character with African-American and Puerto Rican roots, we took it upon ourselves to remedy this. Knowing that Latinos are vastly underrepresented on the staff list of mainstream film outlets, reached out to a handful of critics to provide their take on this animated tale. So I'm just going to read the one review because I thought it was really good. In drawing from the hand-drawn aesthetic that comic books have embraced for decades, the creators behind Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse infused their take on a beloved figure with much-needed freshness, distinctly reminiscent of classic Avengers printed on paper. The feature, co-directed by Bob Persici, Peter Ramsey, and Rodney Rothman, stands out as the most visually groundbreaking studio animated offering of the year. Its relentlessly inventive design coincides with the revamped identity of the web-spewing hero. Now incarnated by Miles Morales, voiced by Shameik Moore, an Afro-Latino teen from Brooklyn who is bilingual, bicultural, and a talented graffiti artist. The lead Spider-Man in this story more accurately reflects the changing face of American society. Furthermore, Miles, as a person of color, doesn't come from a broken home. His parents are educated professionals, he's proud of who he is and where he comes from. It's twice as revolutionary and transcendent as the decision not to use photorealistic look for the animation. And turn the other 5 iterations of the character to join Miles, expand the core concept of inclusion and democratization of Spider-Man. There's a brilliant Spider-Woman, an Asian girl who manipulates a spider in a robotic suit, and even a comically clever cartoon pig that is far from being a traditionally imposing hero. Peter Parker is here, but not as a fanboys might expect him to be. He is a flawed and washed-up white dude whose actions have actually had some consequences. A risk-taking venture on multiple levels.
What are the chances?
Right?
Sorry.
I know.
Oh, white dude whose actions have consequences?
Like, what?
Peter. Yep.
A risk-taking venture on multiple levels into the Spider-Verse is not solely concerned with appeasing the hordes of devoted Marvel-obsessed audience members, but earnestly attempts to invigorate a type of movie that has increasingly become tiresome. It does so not only from a technical standpoint, but also by toppling monolithic visions of who gets to be a hero. The sole existence of Miles Morales in the Marvel Universe was a win in the fight for representation, but to have him star in one of the best reviewed, bound to be hit movies of the year, that's true change, as millions of people this weekend will see him wear the iconic mask with a twist this weekend by Carlos Aguilar. Wow, that was back when people could go to theaters. That's sad.
I don't remember the before four. I don't know what you're talking about.
What was that? But yeah, I thought that was really good. You know, it's that's a Latino person kind of talking about the film and how important it is. And I think he touched on some really good points that, you know, Miles does not come from a broken home. You know, he's happy with who he is. He's bilingual. You know, we see the one main white character in the movie is kind of a mess. And that's okay, you know. Peter Parker's kind of always been a bit of a mess, I think. And at the same time, they don't make you feel like there's not a character you can relate to. And I think you know, it's again good to have that representation. It's not done just to do it. You know, it's really well handled, and you know the film does a great job. You know, making you appreciate Miles while also appreciating the other Spider characters in the film.
Yeah, they make it a point to have all of these characters connect on a level just through being Spider-Man. You know, like there really isn't a like what is a you know, a 40-something washed up white guy have in common.
I think he's only like 38.
Oh, is he? Okay, sorry.
Yeah.
What is a 38 what does a 38 washed up white guy have in common with a teenage you know, black and Latino kid? And yet, you know, it really goes together seamlessly. One thing I want to mention from that review is they said that Miles represents the ever-changing face of America. And that's something I want to call out because we spoke a couple weeks ago with my cousin Moni about decolonizing our minds. And I think that right there is a perfect example of it, because while, yes, this is like a great representation of Latinos in the mainstream, we've been here. Like,
right.
It's not a changing face, it's changing in media, which shows once again why diversity and representation is important and done the right way and not just ham-fisted, because overall I think that does a disservice.
I mean, I think it's more than that, though. I think what they're talking about is, you know, hip-hop being mainstream, graffiti, you know, like people, you know, just being a different culture than, you know, if you were in the 1950s New York, you wouldn't have any of that. So I do think in a way that is accurate, that it's changing, that, you know, things are becoming acceptable that should have been already. They're becoming more popular.
So Miles, more than just his ethnicity, you're saying, in all parts of his character, including all of his hobbies and everything he embodies, the way he dresses, that is also coming into the mainstream along with him.
Absolutely. And I think that was the filmmaker's intention. I think they were like, any kid that, you know, today could relate to that. They, you know, they're into the same kind of music. They could be into the same kind of interests and you know, hobbies and the way they talk. And I think that's great. It's a great representation of all kids. And, you know, Miles just happens to be, you know, biracial.
And that is the point of Spider-Man, and not to completely spoil the ending, but, you know, at the after or just before the credits, after the movie ends, they have a little dedication to Steve Ditko and Stan Lee, creators of Spider-Man, and they say like, thank you, I'm paraphrasing, like, thank you for letting us know we weren't the only ones. And that's what this movie is all about. It's about saying, like, you can be from any background and still relate to others, find a common ground, no matter how small it is, because this is our whole friendship, isn't it? Right?
Yeah.
Like Spider-Man is about the struggle. Spider-Man, it depends on what you want to look at, but Spider-Man is a hardship. As fun as it is to be Spider-Man, you can take whatever you want and insert it into the narrative. Being Spider-Man is about about having a job that you don't want to have. Being Spider-Man is about having trauma you don't want to have. Being Spider-Man is about, the great expectations that you don't want to have. Like
disappointing your loved ones, right? I mean, these are things that is so inherently Spider-Man. It's what's always made him, I think, arguably the most popular Marvel character, one of the greatest comic book characters of all time. These are real things that people deal with, and the way he's represented and written in the comics and movies, it's never easy, right? It's never being this great hero and everyone loving you. It's constant struggle.
And that's what we find out in this movie when we see Miles's imposter syndrome. Throughout the whole time, he's saying like, I don't know what to do. I need to be taught. Meanwhile, you have someone like Peter who, when he was the first Spider-Man, he was just like, fuck it, I'm winging it. I'm taking it by the seat of my pants. And and I think that that's another important part of this film that people don't realize. And this could be with anything. Like I said, it could be any struggle that the Spider-Man suit represents to you. What really ties this all together is that this film is telling you, no matter what your difference is, lean into that. There are other people who also have those differences, and by leaning into your differences, that's how you're actually going to fit in every other place. Because it's not about fitting in, it's about being confident in who you are. And we see that with all of the other spider people who come in. Despite their literal glitching, they fit into this dimension because they choose to, because they know who they are. And Gwen didn't find out who she was by doing the rock band and everything. That was part of it. But she found out who she was by being a spider person. Peter and Penny and other Peter and other Peter, they all found out who they were because he was Peter Porker. Yes. They all found out who they were by being Spider-Man. And I think that that's a great message of this film. It's just, no matter what your difference is, no matter what your passion is, you lean into it and you will find a community. And it is their responsibility to help you and your responsibility to help those who come after you, in my opinion. And that's another thing that I am reading from this film. But I really enjoyed that theme that, guess what? Everybody feels like they're not good enough.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's up to you to create your own value. What really blew me away was how complete of a spider story this was. Because, we see that this is Miles' world, but they take all these Spider-Man and put them in and really embody the character of Spider-Man. Really embody the, I'm going to get the shit kicked out of me and I'm going to get back up, whether or not I know better. And I really loved seeing that spread across all these different worlds. And, especially that scene after Uncle Aaron is shot and they all tell Miles, there's the part they forgot in the spider lair before. They tell him, like, this is part of the job. Like, you can't save everybody.
Yeah, I mean, they all mention how, what made them was losing someone that was so important to them, right? But they still pushed on. They still stayed the hero. And, there's even a training montage where they're all kind of beating up on Miles, and they're talking about how you just got to get up, right? Like, that's what makes you Spider-Man. You keep getting up. And, do you have what it takes? And they're a little mean to him, and at first he doesn't think he has what it takes. But, once he gets the courage to, he finally proves that he belongs with them just as much, if not more, than they all do.
And that courage comes from a lot of different people. Another thing that I liked, me, the way that I was raised, I do believe in the whole theory of it takes a village to raise a child.
Yeah.
And, that's what we see here. We see that Miles is getting the rough love from his father, Jefferson. He's getting the more nurturing stuff from his mom. He's getting streetwise and fun advice from his Uncle Aaron. And then of course all the spider people come in as his mentors as well. And they really kind of help complete him and not him specifically, but help him put everything together and be like, all right, this is what my version of Spider-Man is supposed to be.
Yeah, and those relationships are really well done, I think, in the film. him and his mom, unfortunately, they don't spend as much time on. You can tell that
I
she
hope they
loves
do in
him.
the sequel.
That'd be cool. Yeah, I mean, she's really a pretty important part in the comics. Some stuff that goes on with her, but like it's just his relationship with his dad. Like his dad's not afraid to tell him he loves him, right? But at the same time, they definitely don't see eye to eye on a lot. I don't know if we mentioned it, but his father's a cop, right? And
We did not mention that.
and
No.
that's an interesting perspective, right? Being a black person, being a police officer, we've talked to death about about the police and all that in this podcast, but there's even a part where Miles is like tagging signs with stickers, and his dad catches him, and he's driving, and he obviously Miles likes to do things. He likes to create art. He likes to do graffiti. These are things that cops don't allow. There's even a great part where he's embarrassed because all these kids he knows are seeing him in the cop car, and he's like, "Don't cops run red lights?" And his dad goes, "Oh yeah, some do, but not your dad." So it's clear his dad
Yeah.
his dad's a good guy, right? He thinks he's a good cop. You want to say, he follows the rules. He's not gonna break them because he has power. But there's definitely, like you said, that tough love. And throughout the film, they kind of go into that relationship. There's times where Miles is looking for someone to turn to, and he thinks about talking to his dad, and he never does. He never chooses to. And then his dad keeps yelling at him because he runs away from school at one point because he's really scared. And the mom keeps backing it up, and the dad just keeps kind of giving that tough love. His dad hates Spider-Man. Miles loves Spider-Man, and that scares him later on when he becomes Spider-Man. So there's a lot of
Remember,
issues
even
there.
the best cop will still arrest Spider-Man.
That's right. How fucked up
that
is
in
that?
mind.
How fucked up is that? God. And his dad kind of has that realization later on that maybe he hasn't been connecting with his son the way he needs to. And he comes to his dorm room and he has that really heartfelt speech, and then finally at the end, like there's a little bit of they're gonna kind of make up, and his dad even cheers Spider-Man on, not realizing it's his own son, and that's kind of beautiful. Miles didn't have to reveal his identity to do that. He just had to show what he was willing to do, like what he that he had the courage to stand up and save the city, and that really impressed his dad. And you see that, and again, his uncle Aaron is kind of the opposite end of the spectrum, right? He is a criminal. He's the Prowler, right? It's a big twist. He's been working for the Kingpin. He helped kill the Spider-Man of this universe, Peter Parker of this universe, and Miles is so close with his uncle. He feels like he can talk to him about anything. He's the first person he goes to, but he can't reach him. He can't get him because he's not ever available because he's out committing crimes, right? For Kingpin.
He's prowling, bro.
He's prowling.
A professional prowler.
And he literally tries to kill Miles several times. But when push comes to shove, when he realizes that he is trying to kill Miles, that this little spider kid is his nephew, he doesn't do it because he loves him. And I don't think he would ever hurt him. And he pays for it with his life. And he has that really heartfelt speech too, where he says to him like, "I wanted to be a role model to you, and I let you down, man." And he's like, "You're the best of us. Just you're on the right path, and keep on going." And then he dies, and that's his last words. And he wants Miles to know he's proud of him, that he is doing the right thing. They may have been on opposite sides of this battle, but at the end of the day, his uncle's still happy with the path that Miles has taken. And those relationships are so important. And of course, and then Peter B. Parker, right? The Spider-Man who kind of mentors him the most, because the Peter Parker of this universe dies before he gets a chance to. And, Peter B. Parker is a very broken man. His marriage ended. His aunt died. He's been injured numerous times. He's out of shape. He's depressed. He's just a mess. And I think Miles really kind of brings something out in him. Peter mentions that he was scared of having kids, and yet he's really good with Miles. They have a great relationship. He teaches them a lot. They have a great back and forth. And again, all these kind of relationships that he forms do make him the hero he is at the end.
Now, while this is an amazing character breakdown, it's time to go full Politipop podcast here and shoehorn in a theme. What this relationship said to me upon more recent watchings was, it kind of reminded me of the Boomer generation versus Gen X and Gen Z. or millennials, right? Sorry, there's one in between. Versus Gen X and millennials, specifically how, like we were talking off mic the other day, how credit scores are as old as we are. Like, people were able to fucking get cars, houses, everything else. And then in 1989, they said, we're going to do credit scores and fuck it. We're going to close the door to so many other future generations being able to have what we have. And we see, I think Spider-Man, despite being 38 years old, does represent that older, you don't have to say boomer specifically, but he represents the older generation. You could even say late stage capitalism, as in, like, even though he was doing something that he thought was amazing, being Spider-Man, it has led to all the worst things in his life. But maybe it was just the way that he was doing it. When he's able to help Miles, to help the next generation have access to what he had access to, he finds the best version of himself.
Yeah.
So when we do talk about mutual aid and about, carrying the torch and carrying the fight with next generations, as we have in other podcasts, this carries that similar theme, but not just, maybe it's up to the future to find a nuanced way to do things, whether it's a nuanced way to be Spider-Man or it's a nuanced way to be Miles. He gets to combine the best parts of his uncle and his father together and his mother in order to create his character.
I do agree with that. I disagree with the boomer aspect. I think Peter B. Parker is a really good example of millennials. I think a lot of millennials are kind of stuck in that between two different worlds, like he literally is, where we're kind of known for being depressed, right? We're known for being overwhelmed by bills, by life issues, by we're not really having kids. Just
if
like
you could
Peter.
stop talking about me specifically, I would greatly appreciate this breakdown.
Right? I mean, like he doesn't want to have kids.
Actually, yeah, you're absolutely right. As soon as you said, like, I think he represents millennial, I'm like, you know what? He totally fucking does represent it.
He does, and like I think he has that hope and deep down inside him for a better world, that he would be willing to take part in it, but he's scared. He's been hurt so many times. And I think that's what millennials are all about. We're not the ones that are ushering in kind of this new world, so to speak. I think the Gen Z kids have been much more, adamant about fighting racism and about, fighting for equal, rights for everyone and fighting against capitalism.
We're the exhausted ones.
Yes, exactly. We're there. We're cheering them on. We want to be a part of the fight, but we're just so tired and beaten down. And I think that's where Peter falls. He wants to be a part of this, and I'm sure he wants to train Miles, but at the same time, he's seen so many people be hurt. He's been hurt, and he's just so hesitant to do that.
And in meeting all these other spider people, because that's the other thing too. He's the oldest of this group, but up to this point, he has still been the only spider person. As far as I know, I don't know what Noir's situation is. So he's been at this for a while. And it is easy to get broken down and get tired and be like, listen, this is pointless. But he gets that new injection of life by helping Miles. And I think that's just something we should all remember, that we can help the next generations. And in doing so, and even if it's not the next generation per se, even if it's just mutually finding other people who share similar ideals of helping people, that you can find solidarity that way. I don't want you to be listening and be like, you know what, you're right, I need to find other white supremacists, and together we're gonna feel like anyone can wear the hood.
Yeah, definitely not that. But no, to enact change, yeah. I think not only can you, but you should, right? Like, we should support them. I think the Black Lives Matter movement was a great example. There was a lot of young people organized those movements, 17, 18, 19, 20, in that range. And I think you did see a lot of different people go out there and march, and a lot of millennials did join that movement. And, maybe we didn't necessarily have the strength to really bring it to the forefront, but if we can help guide it and support it and be there, I think that's so important. And I think we all have to remember, as tough as things have been on us and as tough as, our future may look, we it's not over yet, right? We can still work together. We can still make change. And I think we can really break the system and make a better one.
Now, speaking of Black Lives Matter, I just got the Black Lives Matter uniform. Spoilers for anyone. Sorry, it's a little late. In the Miles Morales video game on PlayStation. Did you know they had one?
I had heard something, but I haven't gotten too far in the
I
game, so I didn't see it
I
myself.
didn't know, but it's pretty awesome. Once you finally, it's like you get it after completing a bunch of side missions, and once you do,
It's also like on a building too. I think like it's painted somewhere that you can see.
this is that mission. So at the end of it, they're like,
Okay,
like,
okay.
you took care of all this stuff in our community. Come, to this address. And so when you do, there's this huge Black Lives Matter mural on the side of a wall and a box that has a black and yellow suit, which are the colors of
Nice.
Black Lives Matter. And it says it's called the Uptown Pride suit, but you know damn well what it is. Like, literally, Spider-Man looks at the camera with Black Lives Matter behind him on the building. So
Hell yeah, that's awesome.
so it's very, and once again, that's like one of those moments where, because you and I always talk, where like, whatever, like they did this shit, it doesn't mean anything, whatever. Are they changing policy? And then I saw this, I was like, oh, it's the Black Lives Matter uniform for Spider-Man. And I was like, God damn it, Mike.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's different though. You know what I mean? I mean, they're not politicians; they can't directly change anything. But I think it's a ballsy move to put it in your Spider-Man game when you know a bunch of white dudes are gonna be like, "What the fuck?"
In my Spider-Man,
I don't want that shit.
I thought that for a sec. I was like, wow, a lot of like conservative comic fans are pissed. And I'm like, wait, how many even bought this game? Like, it specifically says Miles Morales on the front. So,
but
so
it
who
says
knows?
Spider-Man.
But yeah, I did like that. Oh, by the way, did you know that Noir, Spider-Man Noir, talks like Joe Biden?
He was going for the hell
The
was he
gumshoe,
going for?
the-
Humphrey Bogart.
Yes, yeah.
But that's kind of funny to think
Well,
about.
I mean, kind of both though, because I guess they're of the same time. Because at one point he's beating up Tombstone and he calls him a turtle slapper, and I was like, that sounds like he could have called him a pony soldier, which is a Joe Bidenism, and it would have been the same fucking thing.
Is that all you got? You're gonna fight or you just bumping gums? You hard-boiled turtle slapper.
Oh my god, that's funny.
Man, I think. One more thing I wanted to talk about with this movie was me personally. You can talk about whatever you need to talk about. Was that it is a kids movie, but it doesn't shy away from adult themes, and I think that is something that's important. And it should be present in more media today. Now, I'm not watching a lot of kids shows, so I'm not sure how present or not present it is. But I believe it was Dan Green, the voice actor of Yugi and Yu-Gi-Oh, who said in an interview that like cartoons should have mature stuff in them. Obviously, they shouldn't be like like HBO level stuff if it's meant for kids, but you shouldn't shy away from things like death or violence necessarily, because these are things that children have to deal with on a daily basis anyway in real life.
Yeah, don't glorify them, but put them,
Exactly.
They are important themes to understand.
And like,
right?
Miles' uncle gets shot and dies in his arms. Like, that's pretty terrible.
Kingpin slaughters Spider-Man in front of him, right? He kills Peter Parker.
Yeah, and this is and we also find out that Kingpin's family died in a car crash.
Which is the whole reason he's trying to bring them back and does the whole Spider-Verse thing.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, also, if you want to look at Kingpin's character too, you see depending on which origin they go with, he is the privileged white male who will stop at nothing to get what he wants and risks a bunch of other people. Like, he is like, the corporatist. I'm going to wait till we get a tweet thread saying like, actually, let me tell you about why Wilson Fisk isn't
Kingpin worked his way up from the bottom.
Depending on which version of Wilson Fisk you are talking about.
He worked in a coal mine for 17 years and saved everyone's lives in there.
Wilson fucking Fisk.
I will say, watching this film, I never felt like it was a kid's movie. And, like, I think there's nothing wrong with adults enjoying kids' movies. I watch Disney films still, right? Pixar movies. But I never felt like this was a kid's movie. It just felt like a good movie. I feel like it was just well-balanced for pretty much anyone.
Really? I agree 100%.
Yeah. Did you notice the Uncle Aaron rest in power at the end? That's what it said when they graffitied.
I did notice that, yes.
Yeah, I thought that was pretty cool that they put that.
The last thing I wanted to discuss was just this meta theme, because we've been talking about it the whole time of like, this is anybody's story. And, if you want to take a comrade approach to it, right, it's like, oh, Spider-Man's not your story, it's our story. You know,
Yeah, we are Spider-Man.
yes, we are. And Spider-Man is that working class hero. Like we can all connect through that working class struggle, similarly to how they all connect through being a spider person. And I want to read this quote from Miles's closing monologue,
Yeah,
where he says,
I had that quote too.
I'm not gonna read the whole thing, only the one part, but he says, "And when I feel alone, like no one understands what I'm going through, I remember my friends who get it. I never thought I'd be able to do any of this stuff, but I can. Anyone can wear the mask. You could wear the mask. If you didn't know that before, I hope you do now. Because I'm Spider-Man, and I'm not the only one, not by a long shot." And, it's getting tears from me now. It gets tears from me every time I hear it, because I feel that's kind of like an apology for the gatekeeping that's been put up through so many years, because it's like, listen, anybody could wear the mask, and if you didn't know that before, now you know. You know that this is your hero, and that you have a place in this world, because it's always been your world. It shouldn't have been taken over by Eurocentric viewpoints and by hateful people. And by that, I really mean the fandom more so than the creators, but it's all over. And, that right there was, that's the whole film for me. If you didn't know that before, I hope you do now. That's my favorite part of it. What else did you have, Ty?
Man, I don't know if I can follow that up. I mean, it's Jesus. You shed tears for this one, man.
I really did. That gets me every time. Spider-Man is.
Nah, I
he's
think
the hero,
I
bro.
agree. He is, and I think it, like you said, it's awesome that now everyone can see him as them, as their hero, someone like them that they can look up to, and that's freaking awesome. You know what I mean? And I do want to point out, they didn't take anything away from Peter Parker. They didn't take anything away from white dudes, right? Like, the Peter Parker of his world was absolutely genius. This great hero. They have a beautiful memorial to him when he dies. It turns out that he had like all this great tech and everything, and all these different suits. And Peter B. Parker is a really lovable and relatable character. He's really, really well written. He's funny, and his struggle to rekindle his romance with his wife, and coming to terms with the fact that maybe he could be a father and actually have a normal life to a degree. I think that stuff's that's all there. And if you don't want to look at that and you want to just be like, oh, they made Spider-Man black, then that's because you're just not paying attention.
Could you imagine just boiling it all down, like missing out on this great experience? Yes, we're biased, because you're like, they made Spider-Man black, like not being able to get past that part.
Yeah, it's just like, holy shit, like you miss such like, witty writing, such great characters, like just for such a simple boiling down of what this film is. And it's just, I mean, it's obviously ignorant, and it's sad. Like you said, they missed out on it. They're missing out on something great. That again has something for everybody. I never felt like, man, I can't relate to this film because I'm white. I never felt like that. Like never, not once. Like it never occurred to me. It just, to even go in with that mindset is just,
if you relate to Spider-Man, you can relate to this film, because it is about outsiders. And that's how you relate to Spider-Man. I wasn't sure if I'd be able to fit it in, but I'm glad I could. My favorite moment from the Andrew Garfield Spider-Man franchise, all two of them, is when he, in the first movie where he's saving the father and son from the car that's about to fall off the bridge, and he's holding the car with the web, and he's telling the kid to climb up, and the kid's like, I can't do it, like I'm not gonna make it, and he takes off his own mask and drops it to the kid. He says, put on the oh god, okay, we're going tears too. He says, put on the mask, it'll make you strong. Because that's what Peter is, he can lift a fucking car, but at the end of the day, he is still just the same insecure person that's trying to navigate his way through life, just like the rest of us are. And, no matter what, we all have to find that thing that makes us strong. We all have to find whatever makes us Spider-Man. One thing that you brought up that it kind of kickstarted a thought in me was, you were talking about how Peter of the Ultimate World had all of this great tech that he left behind. And, we talked about Miles' expectations academically and in his personal life, but we didn't really talk about how Miles is held to this expectation as Spider-Man. Like, he doesn't even have to follow Peter B. Parker. He has to follow, like, the ultimate Spider-Man. And
yeah, literally.
Yep. Once again, this is a politipop horseshoe, maybe. But I think you can also look past this and see the idea of the United States, of a world where, a certain class of people have had access to a bunch of stuff. And it's about making sure that those who come after have the same access, so that way we can all prosper in a similar fashion. And I think that is also a part of Miles' narrative. If you do,
I like
look
that.
for it.
I like that. I mean, I think that's actually, for me, that's my favorite scene in the whole film, is when he finally decides to get rid of his costumes, his Spider-Man costume that he got from Stan Lee, and he gets like his real, the real costume from the Ultimate Spider-Man, and he graffitis it, right? He colors it the way he wants it to. He designs it himself. He makes it him. And then, embraces being Spider-Man. And it's such a beautifully, rendered scene. It's very emotional, really fun to watch. And it kind of just really says, this is Miles Morales Spider-Man. This is what Spider-Man is right now. And I think that's such a great moment.
And there's so many moments before that scene too that really show that he is his own version. Like, I'm sure, we've seen so many different iterations of Spider-Man do so many different things at this point, but like to see him just running in the street while webbing up a subway car and, using the buildings for leverage and hopping over trucks, like he is a man of the people, just like he said at the beginning. That's where he wants to be. He wants to be with his people, and he epitomizes that as Spider-Man as well as Miles.
Yeah, I mean, he even has his own unique abilities, so he really is very different.
Yes, turning invisible and the Venom Strike.
And the Venom Strike, yeah.
Which we didn't bring up.
No, I mean, it's not super important, but, that's not what it took to win. It's not what it took to win, to save the day, but it did help occasionally.
Well, I mean, it kind of did, because he was able to use it on, like, basically it was the idea of what can you use. It's Daniel San's crane kick. It was his Venom sting is Miles's power, and he was able to go, hey, also, and bring in.
Yeah. But I think, for all the Spider people that he was with, we're putting all this pressure on him. Can you do the Venom sting? Can you do the invisibility? Or you can't do it on command, then you can't be Spider-Man. But I think he came to the realization, he proved to them that, that's not what made him Spider-Man. It was his own, courage and confidence in being who he is that allowed him to be Spider-Man, which then allowed him to use those abilities.
And also that came from, and you brought it up probably 20, 30 minutes ago by this point, I don't know, time is a construct, but talking about the speech that his father gave to him through the door. And that was another great moment, where he says, I've been pushing you because I see this spark in you. And he decides that maybe it's not up to him to push where Miles uses that spark, but just to cultivate it wherever it is, and try and encourage him that way. And it's great, man. There's so many great themes of there is some race stuff, but there's a lot of generational stuff,
right? And
a lot of spider stuff, which I just fucking love, man. That's that character.
I mean, there's references to like everything. They have the Spider-Man 3 like finger guns. They talk about the Spider-Man popsicle, the theme song. I mean, the upside down kiss.
The Spider-Man 2 subway car and cafe car. A lot of.
I mean, it's awesome. There's so many Spider-Man references. They even had beginning of the film, the famous phrase "with great power comes great responsibility" was said by Cliff Robertson, who played Uncle Ben in the original trilogy. He passed away, so they used archive footage, which I think is freaking awesome.
Remember that, Pete.
Yeah,
remember that.
Yep. There's some great trivia on IMDb. There's like a couple things I wanted to share. One was Phil Lord and Christopher Miller had a goal for the movie: inspire young people to become heroes, inspire grown-ups to help them do it. Remind us all that you don't need to be bitten by a radioactive spider to do your part. You are powerful, and we are counting on you. Which I think really supports what you kind of brought up a little while ago, and that was what they were going for. So that's kind of awesome.
Too. I started laying
It's okay.
out the book today, so.
That's okay, guys. Don't worry. When our comic book comes out, it's gonna blow your fucking minds. All right. So,
By that point, there will be so much stuff like it, but
it's okay. We'll have it.
It'll be ours, baby. It's us.
The film required up to 180 animators. I think 177 specifically. The largest crew ever used by Sony Pictures Animation for a film. So they were really going for a comic book look with the film specifically. They wanted you to be able to pause it and make it look like there were lines from a comic book on it. They went so far as if you pause any time a train goes by, all the animators wanted to animate Stan Lee, so he's in every single train.
Get the hell out of here! I'm gonna have to look. For
Yeah,
that.
Isn't that wild?
Oh, that's so good.
Yeah, and this was Stan Lee's final voice cameo. He died shortly before the film actually was released. And luckily he was in it, but the film was originally only dedicated to Steve Ditko, but they wound up dedicating it to both as the creators of Spider-Man.
I'm not sure that these will make it into the episode, but do you have any favorite Spider-Man moments?
I don't know if I have a very specific one. I always like the Spider-Man No More and then him coming to terms with it. I've always loved Spider-Man being that struggling hero to find a balance, a work-life balance, I guess, right? To be there for his loved ones, to also, save the day. And, I'm a child of the 90s, and I grew up reading that Spider-Man and Mary Jane stuff where they were married, and she really, was his wife, and she was always worried about him. I recently reread Maximum Carnage, and it doesn't hold up as well as I remembered, but
a lot of 90s books don't.
But I will say they had a really great theme in it. It was Peter constantly feeling like, he was a failure, he couldn't do it, and coming to terms with the fact that, he wasn't, that the fact that he keeps trying is what makes him a hero and makes him different than somebody else, even if it does hurt, himself in the end or his loved ones. And Mary Jane comes to the realization that she can't expect Peter to sit back and do nothing when he has that power, right? He has that responsibility. And I always thought that was great. And, I just enjoy when Peter is in that struggle, I guess, because it makes him feel real. And I really enjoyed the Ultimate run, so I loved all the movies. I just love Spider-Man. I think he's great. And I know your favorite moment, but I'm sure you would like to bring it up.
Actually, it's one of two. I mean, they're both my favorite moments. I'm pretty sure I told you, though. Which one do you think it is?
The one where he's stuck underneath the...
Stuck underneath. Yep. Yeah, that's...
yeah, he's...
ASM, I think it's 33. Spider-Man No More is 35.
Yeah,
okay.
I think
So
yep.
After that, 2 issues after that, he was like, fuck this. But yeah, he's trying to find a special isotope to help save Aunt May because her blood is radioactive after getting a transfusion from Peter. So of course he is about to lose another relative because of his own fault. So he, in his quest to find this isotope, he is covered in a bunch of machinery in an underwater base, and he cannot possibly lift any. And they make it a point in the book to show just how much fighting he did before he got to this point, that he is exhausted. Old school Marvel is so vivid with their narratives, and or I should say Stan is, and he's just lifting it, and he's thinking, oh, Aunt May is gonna die because of me, and Uncle Ben died because of me, and I can't be responsible for it again. And he's able to push himself to lift up all this machinery. If you've seen Spider-Man Homecoming, they reenacted after the Vulture fucks his ass up while he's wearing the sweatshirt costume. But yeah, there's that one, and the other one where he gets his neck broken, but soon realizes that he was hypnotized to believe his neck was broken, and that he literally had to will himself to walk again. Like, he just refused to accept the conditions that were presented to him, and he was like, no, I get back up. This is what I do. I'm Spider-Man.
It is what he does. I mean, that's great. I mean, my favorite moment from the movie is when he holds the train with his webbing, and like it's like his suit's tearing, and then he falls back, and the whole train kind of catches him, and his mask is off, and they all conceal his identity, and I think that was Spider-Man 2, and it's such a cool moment, and it kind of really, I thought, was such a great representation of what makes him Spider-Man.
I am totally rewatching these movies now.
I know, right?
I was just going back to some of my favorite MCU stuff, as well as a few stuff that had things from WandaVision, just so so my wife could maybe take a look if she's TikToking nearby or something.
Nice.
But yeah, the thing I want to close out on is that was what you said about Lord and Miller when they said they wanted to inspire the next generation to be heroes. And I think that's so important. And it's something that people don't realize. Like, guess what? We've been raised to be heroes since forever. So don't be fucking surprised when we take to the streets to protest what we don't think is right. We were raised on fucking Hunger Games, Harry Potter, a variety of different comic books. Like, every step of the way, the narrative has always been speak truth to power. By the way, in the video game at one point, I feel weird about it because part of the narrative is that, like, all the side missions, some of them are escaped convicts who are, like, doing these, like, crimes and shit. And I'm like, this is kind of weird. But at one point, while Miles is beating the shit out of these guys, he goes, can't you guys just rob some corrupt landlords instead of robbing actual, like, people?
Nice.
I was like, holy shit. Like, they fit a lot of stuff into the
that's
game
cool.
that's, like, really, either woke or relevant or both. And I enjoy it.
That's awesome. And I think while we're mentioning, diversity and being a voice of change, remember those the camps are still open, and there's still migrant children being held in really shitty conditions as of right now. So don't let your voice be unheard. Let's get them out of there. Let's keep fighting for change and doing the right thing around here.
What can we do? Can we call our like local representatives and be like, hey, can you get the president's ear and be like, hey, stop?
I think that's probably one way, but I know there's a lot of law teams and stuff that are working to free them, so you can donate to them. They're obviously doing it pro bono and stuff, and anything, you can protest, you can call your representative. I think, just trying to make it known that you're not going to stand for that, and don't fucking let Joe Biden do it, right? He just opened a new camp this week, so, last week.
Concentration camp, not one of the good ones either.
No, he opened another overflow facility for migrant children. So, whether you voted for him or not, don't be afraid to hold him accountable too. Let's not fucking let him walk all over us with this stuff. Let's make sure, everybody knows what's the right thing to do. So.
Yeah, don't let him be a fucking turtle slapper or a pony soldier.
A turtle slapper.
No, but guys, he is continuing to jail children, and hopefully on a karmic level, we will meet our reckoning for this because, the bad guys can't keep getting away.
Hopefully not. Otherwise, maybe the bad guys will always won. I don't know.
Yeah, you don't know. But what you do know, Ty, is what movie we will be reviewing or reading between the lines of next week. What movie is that going to be?
We will be reviewing Fast Color.
That's right, Fast Color. 3 generations of black women with superpowers. I'm going to leave it at that because that's all I really know about the movie. But yeah, we're going to be reviewing that next week. This one actually might be more trauma than triumph also, but hey, just fun black stories we're going for.
I've never seen it, so I'm excited.
Yes, yeah, I'm excited too. I haven't seen it either, but Mark Bernardin on the Fat Man Beyond podcast talks quite a... He always has, like, takes on things that you normally wouldn't hear about. And you're like, oh, that's pretty cool. That's nice. But that being said, thank you so much for tuning in, everybody, for the Politipop podcast. I have been...
No. Okay, let's do this one last time. For the Politipop podcast, I've been Ty.
And I've been Mike Booch.
That was all I got.
Oh, damn it.
I just wanted to say it. So.
Go for it. Okay. Hold on a sec. Now, all right, you've inspired me, and this is your fault. All right, let's do this one last time. My name is Mike Booch For a while, I thought I was the only host of the Politipop podcast. Then Ty came along. And we read between the lines of movies and stuff together. We save the city, play Xbox. But whenever we feel alone, we know that our 0 Patreon subscribers and a couple hundred listeners are fighting the keyboard war with us. Anyone can record a podcast. You can record a podcast. If you didn't know that before, you do now. Remember, no matter what you're watching, what you're reading, what you're listening to, taking in, never stop thinking, never stop learning, and always remember to be your own hero and to read between the lines.
And scene.
That is a scene.